that Atlanta Falcons radio show. So get up, get out, and get something. Get in the zone. We live on the DT. Tune in, cause we about to blow like TNT. Falcons Central Radio Show. Gonna be berserk, you heard. We ain't even tripping, catching y'all slipping. What's good, man? On the Pro Football Central Radio Network, hosted by Aaron Freeman and Scott Carasik. What? This right here is a good present for you. Enjoy my presence like I was Santa Claus, man. Chillin', doing it.
So welcome back to another episode of Falcons Central Radio. I'm here with Aaron Freeman. We just saw the first Falcons preseason game. So what were a couple quick takeaways that you have from that, Aaron?
I'm glad football's back. I think the Falcons, overall kind of were basically, in the words of Denny Green, what we thought they were. Pretty good team, defense is looking solid, offense looking solid. So, yeah.
I agree. I think that a couple things I'll get into a little bit more later, but I think that the right tackle question is being way overblown by the media right now. I think that the announcers in the game were pretty awful. To be nice about it, I think they were awful.
Well, it is preseason for everybody, so we'll cut them a little bit of slack. Or I'll cut them a little bit of slack.
But Gruden should see that when Geno Atkins shoots a gap, that it's probably not on the right tackle when the guy lined up right over the right guard. Just say.
Okay.
Talking about not the 3rd and 2 play where James Harrison, who both of Lamar Holmes' plays, one was a James Harrison mastery play. The other was Geno Atkins going down the line because Garrett Reynolds decided to not engage him. So Lamar Holmes tried to engage him. And, he's Geno Atkins. He should have gone to a Pro Bowl last year if he didn't. I don't really know if he did or not, but he should have.
Definitely.
I don't watch the Pro Bowl.
No one should.
No one should. But no, Geno Atkins should have gone to a Pro Bowl even if he didn't. And, he threw away Lamar Holmes like it was nothing. Well, it was his first game starting. Come on, man. You can't blame Lamar Holmes for that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Geno Atkins, with possible exception of J.J. Watt, is the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL. And he certainly was last year. And
I'd say Watt's better than him. But,
okay. Well,
Geno's a very, very close two.
Okay. And so basically the Falcons, just keeping it simple, the Falcons don't have anybody on their offensive line that's capable of blocking him, let alone Lamar Holmes, who's only played 7 offensive plays prior to last week's game. So, if he struggles or anybody on the offensive line struggles to block Geno Atkins, that's not because they're not good. It's because Geno Atkins is so good. So I concur with your conclusions.
Exactly. Oh my God, he got beat by a Pro Bowler. Oh, I mean,
an elite Pro Bowler, not just like, some guy who had one good year, but, somebody who is probably one of the 5 or 6 best defensive linemen in the NFL. So, we're not talking about, what is his name, Chidi Ahanatu or whoever,
There's a name.
Yeah, I think he had one. Didn't he go to the Pro Bowl one year? He had 12 sacks one year, and it was like, who is this guy?
Yeah, but, or one of my personal favorites. It's not like he went against Prairie Jerry and got beat by him.
Yeah.
Not to be a jerk here, but Prairie Jerry cut him.
Yeah.
Cut him.
There's an alternate universe where Prairie Jerry is Geno Atkins, but that is the universe where everything that exists in this universe is the exact opposite. Up is down, blue is red. I don't know, Geno
I'm
Atkins is
married.
Parade Jerry. Yeah.
I'm married to Scarlett Johansson. Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll go into that a little bit more later. Week 1 freakouts, week 1 calm your horses. Week 1 big on the stat sheet and is more solid than we thought he was going to be, kind of things. But before that, we've got a guest who worked for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he worked as the operations director, I guess. Well, I'll get his official title from him when he gets on. But Joe Bussell will be joining us very shortly.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central Radio Network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
So welcome back. We've got Joe Bussell here. He was the former operations director of the Buccaneers. I don't know the official title.
Team operations coordinator.
Team operations coordinator.
Yep.
So you've probably got some fun, interesting stories about one of our good division rivals.
No. We were clean and very well put together, and nothing ever went wrong. We were a perfectly run franchise.
Perfectly right.
So when you described what you did, have you ever seen the show Necessary Roughness?
Yes, I have.
I kind of envisioned you doing what Nico does. He just makes stuff happen.
In a sense, yeah, but not in the same way that he does. He's the guy behind the scenes that kind of takes care of everything. I wasn't that kind of fixer. We really didn't have problems as they put through on that show. We definitely we had moments where we had issues that we had to take care of, but nothing that was really crazy, especially involving players or coaches or staff or anything like that. It was usually just a hiccup of a bus wanting to break down or a plane arriving late or something not being ready, whatever it may have been. That we just had to kind of problem solve right on the spot. That was pretty much when people asked me what I did, I just said I'm a problem solver. We plan everything ahead of time, and then when stuff goes wrong, as it always does, we fix it and make sure that nobody notices that anything ever went wrong.
That's always the aggravating part of logistics, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's one of those jobs where if everybody notices you doing your job, then you're not doing your job very well, because it's fairly thankless. People understand that, they see you running around all the time, but at the same time, if people notice the job that you're doing, it usually means something has gone wrong and you're having to fix something. So the less you get noticed, the better.
So you're like the offensive lineman of
exactly.
The front office.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That makes sense. Speaking of offensive line, we kind of touched on it before you got on. What were your thoughts on the Falcons' offensive line this past Thursday?
I think they held up a little bit better than what I thought they were going to be. I thought Thomas going down was really going to hurt him. But I think that they're a little bit deeper than I kind of than I expected, which makes complete sense because I love Thomas Dimitroff. I think he's one of the best GMs in the league. I think he's built a fantastic squad, and Atlanta is built. They're built for a certain thing, especially on defense. They're very. He said this before. They're very aware of what their coaches want to do, and they draft towards that. So I think the offensive line is going to hold up just fine. I really think that at this point, the only stout front seven that they're going to face in the division is going to be Carolina. I think with the injuries that's taken a toll on the Saints, they're still going to have problems creating a pass rush. And the Bucs is still yet to be seen what they can produce. I think Claiborne adds is an obvious weapon there, but other than that, everything else is still wait and see with them.
Did you have any other thoughts on what you saw for the Falcons, maybe on the defensive side of the ball? I know a lot of talk has been going on about the two rookies that were the top 2 picks, and Trufant and Robert Alford.
Absolutely, I thought Trufant and Alford both played really well. I said this the other day to somebody else that I believe that it's a risk to put rookies in at corner and just let them play, especially on their, in a division like the AFC South where they're gonna have to face guys like Vincent Jackson and Marcus Colston and Lance Moore and Mike Williams, and they're gonna face stout wide receivers week in and week out, and they're gonna have to perform. It worries me a little bit that they're so young at cornerback, but if those guys hold up, they'll be great. I do think that Asante Samuel, he's probably a good leader for that group, but he has his hits and misses. He's he can get burned with the best of them, but he's a risk taker. He's a floater. He goes around and he goes where the ball is, and sometimes it works out fantastic for him, and sometimes it doesn't. I hope that they're a little bit more conservative than he is, but they learn the instincts that he has as well. That's really my concern with them, especially because Atlanta plays a very coverage-based defense. They mix their coverages as well as anybody in the league, and is probably more than anybody in the league. That's why they draft, or have added smaller. So I don't want to say smaller, but about average size linebackers that fly all over the field. They're more about getting those guys into zones and getting them to spots rather than they are plugging up the middle and worrying about the run. So, and I think that's what you saw the other night. I think they're still going to play that same scheme. There's no change there. Corey Peters looks about as he's a UK guy, so he's always a guy that I like to see. He's going to be fine in the middle. I'm really interested to see how OC fills in for this defense. I'm not sure if he still has it or not. I'm always skeptical whenever really good teams let guys go and let guys walk like that. Anytime the Giants or the Ravens or the Patriots or, to this point, the 49ers or the Seahawks let guys go, it always worries me. But then again, I also trust in what Dimitroff is doing, and I trust that he would add a player that he really thought would benefit the team.
I can agree with you there. Now, as far as, I like OC. I think he's going to be more of a defense. He's brought in more to be a defensive leader. He did have a couple pressures in this past game, but I can see what you mean by if a good team lets a guy go, it says something, whether it's a cap issue or a personality conflict with the coaches or something along those lines.
Right. There's always a reason that those guys are let go. I think the financial angle is a little bit overblown, because if a team really wants to keep somebody, they'll find a way to keep someone. You can always restructure a quarterback's contract, as long as it hasn't been restructured in the last year. You can always restructure somebody's contract to play with the financials of it and get under the cap enough to get somebody in there. And if the guy really wants to be there, he'll work with you as well to make sure that the cap numbers work out and that some of that money is pushed down the line.
So is that why you think Richard Seymour hasn't signed with Atlanta yet?
There's a lot of the veterans. It's just kind of a unintended consequence of the CBA that veterans are finding it harder and harder to find a place because they don't want to play for less than they're worth. But also, any of the guys that there's a stipulation in the CBA that veterans are given, a guaranteed salary for 1 year of one of their contracts if they're on the roster day one. And I'm not really explaining that right, but that's the easiest way to explain it.
The vested veteran loophole?
Yeah, exactly. The vested veteran loophole. It's exactly what it is. So whenever, if a guy like Richard Seymour is on the roster on day one and then he's cut after week 2, he can choose to make his salary guaranteed for the year, and the Falcons are on the hook for that. And there's a bunch of guys that are like that. There was a few guys that I didn't know if they were going to make camps or not, like Dallas Clark, but he did because of injuries, and that's basically what I think Richard Seymour is holding out for is another injury or two to happen to somebody, and somebody adds him out of desperation and paying him what he wants rather than taking whatever somebody will give them after the first, after their opening weekend.
That definitely makes sense. Now, as far as the linebackers, you said they like the smaller guys that kind of fly around. Did you see any linebackers on Thursday that stood out to you, not in the first team, but in, say, the second team? The guys like Paul Warlow, Nick Clancy, Brian Banks in that group.
I paid a little bit of attention to Brian Banks. He's so interesting because he's been out of the game for a while. He's stayed in good shape, however, and I think he's got a chance to make the team. Everybody loves an underdog story. He's going to be a special teams guy, especially to start off on. So that's basically what you're gonna get out of him is a special teams guy. Did Robert James play? I don't ever remember seeing Robert James play in that game, which is somebody I actually meant to look out for, and then he never showed up.
He was with the starting unit.
He played 5 snaps and then he got hurt, and then they put in Pat Schiller.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah, because I meant to look for him to see what he was going to do, and Schiller played all right. He wasn't anything spectacular. He didn't really impress me. He looked like a second teamer out there, a guy that you can get 10 to 15 to 20 snaps out of in a game, or if you have to, but not somebody you want starting 16 games a season.
Did you see the same kind of stuff that we saw from Warlow?
I don't even think I watched that far into the game. Whenever I'm watching the preseason games, I end up getting through into about the third quarter and then realizing that the rest of the guys that are going to play in the fourth quarter probably aren't going to make the roster. I've only seen a few snaps from Warlow, and I would be hesitant to say that he would make the 53-man roster. And again, if he does, that would be as a special teams guy. He's a possible guy that, he's a possible guy that could end up on the practice squad, which is something that I think would be a good spot for him. I mean, he's the guy. He came from Delaware, right? He was a small school guy. He was a small school guy that's getting a chance, and he's a perfect practice squad player. Somebody that you would hope could develop with a little experience at a higher level of football.
Okay. One of the things you were talking about earlier was about veterans finding that their money, just to go on a little non-Falcons tangent a little bit. Do you think you think that's going to change in the future, or is there going to be a point, the next couple of years, veterans are basically going to have to make decisions where I'm not going to get paid as much as I want to, so I just better take whatever's the best offer out there?
It's really hard for these guys. It's a lot of times I don't like to compare players' lives to our own, but think if you were making a $50,000 job, and then you were let go by whoever it was that you were working for, and somebody said, yeah, we'll take, some other competitor of the company you work for said, yeah, we'll take you, but we'll pay you half of what they were paying you. it feels like a step back, and it's hard for guys to get over, especially these guys who have prided themselves on being successful their entire careers, and have been told from Pee Wee football that they're the best player on their team and the best player in their league, and that continues all throughout high school. So these guys are built up to think that nothing bad could ever happen to them. And especially the guys that are veterans that last 6, 7, 8, 10 years in the league, and now all of a sudden they're looking for a new home and nobody wants them. It's kind of a culture shock to them, especially, and it's a shot to their pride, really. So it's hard for guys to think about that. I know I had talked to Rondé once, and I asked him if he would ever do coaching. He was like, man, coaching's tough. He goes, it's more hours than players put in, and he goes, it's a fraction of the cost. He goes, there's some guys that can do it, and there's some guys that can't. And now you see him in a media role, which makes a lot of sense after he said something like that. So I think it's mentally tough for these guys to come out of a job that was well paying and be told, well, they've been told forever that they're great, and now they're being told that, yeah, you're not good enough for me to pay you what you think you're worth.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, I know there's been a lot of talk about the new CBA and how the players got the raw end of the CBA, and how, there was a hope that, this new TV contract in, 2014 or 2015 would kind of, I guess, correct the market so that now the salary cap increases and veteran players would be able to get more money. But, I'm starting to think that maybe teams have just kind of gotten content with, underpaying these guys, getting these guys, 75 cents, 60 cents on the dollar. And even with that increased cap that's coming in the next couple of years, you won't see, teams spending quite as much as they did under the previous CBA. So I was just curious.
Yeah, no, and what you're seeing is it's essentially they're weeding out the middle class. Teams are more about keeping the high-profile guys. You're seeing the quarterbacks getting record deals, hundreds of millions of dollars over 5, 6, 7 years, or however long they are, and to be able to pay those guys a higher percentage of your cap space, you've got to make cuts somewhere else. Well, if you're cutting guys lower on the roster, it doesn't really help you because they're already at league minimum anyways. So you've got to start cutting veterans that have significant amounts under their contract, and that's where you're weeding out the middle class. So now you're cutting those guys out off the team, and you're loading in with younger players that are on less cumbersome contracts that are at league minimum or slightly above, and those guys are filling the spots that the veterans did. So now all of a sudden your talent isn't as good, but you're not spending as much either. And I think it's something you're seeing across the entire league. It's something that could be addressed, but it's not going to be addressed until the next CBA comes around, in 2018 or 2020 or whenever it is. I forget when this one ends. But yeah, that's whenever it'll be addressed. I don't think that there's anything that can be done. The NFLPA can try to get something done about it, but when they had time to sit down at the negotiating table and get what they wanted, it doesn't seem like they got anything that they wanted, and everything came out short-sighted for them for this CBA.
I mean, that was a whole situation of the owners locking them out to make it better for them, though. Wasn't that the whole point of the owners doing what they did?
What it was is when the previous CBA ended, the players wanted a greater cut of what the owners were making. The players had said, "Hey, we think we deserve more," and owners said, "No, we don't think you deserve as much as you're getting," and so that's where they started butting heads. So they started, and the lockout happened because the negotiations never progressed forward to a point where they allowed players in. So the lockout is kind of a misnomer in the fact that the lockout actually happened whenever it came to a point where players, by the rules of the previous CBA, would have been allowed into the facilities, and the owner said, no, if we don't have a CBA, we're not going to allow you guys in the facility. So It was a struggle over money for the most part, and the ownership. I think ownership got more out of it. The NFL got more out of it than the players did. But yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't like. Whenever I think of a lockout, I think of it in the MLB terms. Whenever baseball owners said, "Yeah, we're not going to pay you guys this money anymore, so we're locking you out until we get something else, until we get a new deal done." This one was the contract had ended, and now we're going to renegotiate. But until we renegotiate, you guys just stay away from the facilities. It wasn't as aggressive as what other lockouts have been.
Okay. Well, bring it back to NFC South talk. You're a Tampa Bay Bucks, former Tampa Bay Bucks employee. You know, I think everybody pretty much believes that the NFC South is between the Saints and the Falcons. And what are your thoughts on, are the Bucks like competing are they good enough this year to be a division winner, or are they kind of trying to sneak in as a wild card possible team? How good do you think the Bucks have the capacity to be in 2013?
I think the AFC South is one of the hardest divisions to predict. There for what was it, from 2002 to like 2011, it was, or something like that, or 2009 maybe. It was all those years where every team that was in last place the previous year went to first the next season. It was worst to first every single season for like 7 in a row or something ridiculous like that. And then it stopped for a season, then it happened again another 2 or 3 seasons. And I think it's something that you're going to see this year as well. I think the entire division is up for grabs. I know I take a lot of heat. The Falcons have put together a great resume, and I think that they've got a great team on the field. But I think that the ball has bounced their way a lot more last year than I think people realize. And that's something I said about the 2010 Bucks, is whenever they won 10 games, I said a lot went right. Every fumble seemed to fall into their hands. Every jump ball seemed to come down on theirs. Every ref's call seemed to come down on their side. And I don't think the Falcons, luck was that great, but I think that they were very fortunate. They were a great team. They deserved to go as far as they did, and they really probably should have been in the Super Bowl. But a couple last second plays just couldn't get it done. There were a couple plays from being in the Super Bowl, so that's hard to discount. But people need to understand every year that turnover is huge in the NFL. Parity is the great equalizer, and that's what the NFL shoots for. And I think the AFC South is a great representation of that. The Bucs absolutely do have the firepower for it, especially on their first team. Beyond that, that's whenever I start to worry about them. I think that they lack depth, especially on the defense. I think their O-line is fairly deep. They can survive, if they have a couple of injuries, which they did last year. Vincent Jackson and Mike Williams are studs, obviously. They're more improved throughout their third, fourth, and fifth receivers this year than they were last year. I mean, they had Tyquan Underwood playing as their third receiver last year towards the end of the season, and now he's barely scratching at being the fifth receiver. So they're a little bit deeper there. If Josh Freeman goes down, I don't know what happens to that offense. I'm not sure Glennon is ready to lead an NFL offense at this point, and it's not something you want to put in his hands. On the defensive side, they're lacking depth at defensive tackle for sure. There's some promising guys that are behind Claiborne and Bowers at defensive end. I don't think Greg Schiano would be talking about Bowers the way that he is if he didn't believe in the guys that were behind him. Linebackers, I think strong side linebacker is going to be a problem for them. I like Dakota Watson as a second team guy, as a special teams guy. I don't know how Casillas is going to would play in 16 games at strong, on the strong side. I have my doubts, but he's a good player. He should, he'll get his snaps for sure. I think cornerback's probably where the Bucs are deepest right now. I think some guys that you'll hear more of are Leonard Johnson and Anthony Gore. Leonard's probably going to be the nickel back, and Gore will end up being the fourth, I think. And of course, they added Deshaun Goldson at safety, but they lost Rondé, and Deshaun is a little bit underrated in terms of his ability to cover the middle of the field. He is a nosy guy that likes to get up on the line of scrimmage and play in the run game. But so is Mark Barron. So they're going to use those guys interchangeably, I think, in who is in the box and who's playing deep, and they're going to be able to move them around and find some things. So they've got pieces to definitely make a run at it. Health is going to be a major concern. How healthy they can stay this year. They're going to need some luck, I think, to win. I think they need luck to even get into the playoffs. They're going to need a lot of luck to get in and win the division, or they're just going to need the AFC South to kind of crumble around them. And if something like that were to happen, I think Atlanta survives and Atlanta wins the division. If the NFC South does tend to crumble, I have my doubts about Carolina, but the more I watch them, the more I think that maybe they're a team that could surprise some people as well. I still got to watch some more film on them. And then the Saints, their O-line really concerns me about how they're going to protect Drew Brees all year with some of the teams that they play throughout the NFC, because they're facing a lot of good pass rushers this year. The whole NFC South is.
Okay. Yeah, if I could wax poetic a little bit on the rest of the NFC South. Yeah, I look at the two teams, Tampa Bay and Carolina, and it looks like Tampa Bay is, I guess, Carolina's a team that's kind of struggling. They're competitive, but they just can't find a way to get over the hump. And you look at a team like Tampa Bay, it seems like they have the right blueprint that Carolina should be following by, building an offense around Doug Martin and a running game, and then trying to, they upgraded their secondary with picking up Revis and Golson, as you were talking about, and trying to hold on to leads as opposed to making Josh Freeman pass, to try to catch up to teams, which is not Josh Freeman's strength. He's more of a I'm going to hand it off and play action type of quarterback, and that's sort of what Cam Newton is. But you look at Carolina's secondary, and it's a lot of question marks. They got a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that haven't really played at a high level up till now. And so it looks like Carolina's going to be one of those teams that's going to be playing from behind a lot, which is not suited to the type of team that they want to be. And you look at Tampa Bay, I could see a scenario where, best case scenario, as you were talking about, they stay healthy and they get Doug Martin to kind of be, this sort of running back that people think he's capable of being. And they can kind of just, feed him and let him carry them. They could be in that playoff mix by the end of the year. But Joe, we will get you out on this question. Everybody, kind of knows that in the preseason, the third preseason game is kind of that big game because that's the game where teams play their starters, and the fourth preseason is kind of when all the, the backup guys, all the guys are trying to fight for their, to get that last shot at making the roster. And the first preseason game is kind of just, just getting the rust off of. What should we think of the second preseason as? What's kind of the, kind of role that the second preseason plays in?
Well, I think you said it right. The first preseason game, it's kind of, you get your starters in there just to get them some game action. In the second preseason game, you're going to see them go a little bit deeper into the playbook. They're going to have some specific things that they'll want to work on, especially as on the first team. And they'll stay out a little bit longer. Maybe they play the entire, first quarter or, fairly deep into the second quarter, depending on how many snaps they actually get or how many series. But they're actually going to have some stuff that they're going to work on. Whether that's functionality in the passing game or putting some route concepts together, or they want to, some teams will just want to get their offensive line some work hitting. So they'll run the ball a lot and they'll try to plow over people.
That's what I'm
what you're
listening.
gonna be. Yeah, that's what you'll be looking for. So you'll get a little bit better of evaluation. Guys will kind of have a better understanding of who's around them, what they're working with in games. I think a good example of this is whenever you watch Tom Brady and the Patriots, and how he's working with his new young wide receivers, and Danny Amendola is he's trying to teach them as they go, and I think that's what you see in the second game is there's going to be a lot more teaching of hey, you did this wrong, but we need to get this right because it's almost the time to go. We've worked on this now for over a month, and we've worked on it in the off season and OTAs as well. So the deeper they go into the game, the more into the playbook they'll get. They'll have some tendencies that they'll start to identify as far as play calling with some teams, or they'll try to avoid them. But it always seems to happen. And then beyond the first team, they're still looking at those last 15 players that they're eventually going to have to cut. Because once that third game comes around, they know that in coaches and personnel, front offices, they know that they have that third game to still evaluate all of the end of roster players, but they won't have as much time because your starters are going to play in probably a series into the second half, and then you've only got a half to evaluate these guys rather than 3/4. So they're really going to be paying attention to the guys. You'll start to see some guys might not get as many snaps. If the front office knows that 5 guys aren't going to make the team, they're not going to waste any time with those guys on the field. They might throw them in for a couple special teams play or 1 or 2 snaps, but they're not going to get significant time because they want the guys out there that they need to see, that they need to evaluate. Those guys that fit in that 50 to 65 range on the roster, because it's a very murky area when it comes to evaluating those players. There's not a whole lot of separation, yet teams have to figure out who those last few guys are that make the active roster and who they're willing to take a risk to put out there for other teams to claim off of waivers so that maybe they can bring him back onto the practice squad.
Okay. That was a very good explanation of it. Now I, kind of know what I'm looking for.
Cool.
Thanks for being on with us, Joe. You are on Twitter at NFLosophy, is that correct?
Yep, that's right.
And you have a website as well?
Yep, NFLphilosophy.com.
Okay.
Thanks,
And
guys, I appreciate it.
we hope we can get you on at a later time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun, guys.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
Hi, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show. Back with my good friend Scott Carasik. Just spoke to Joe Bussell. Scott, I thought Joe made an interesting point that I think we were talking about earlier. We had a brief Twitter exchange about, and I think now is the time to kind of jump into it, and then we can get more into detail about what we saw in the Falcons' first preseason game and maybe what we'll see in the next one. But he was talking about how the CBA is eliminating some of the middle class of the NFL. And I think our Twitter exchange earlier discussing the potential future of one Stephen Nicholas kind of epitomizes that, because now I think everybody's wondering whether Stephen Nicholas has to be worried about his job, especially with the performance of Paul Warlow and some of the other young linebackers in the first preseason game.
That was kind of my point, is the money for a backup, if he loses the base lineup, the 4-3 lineup job to Croy Bierman, and then he loses the 3-down lineman job to Akeem Dent, Nicholas is only going to be in there sparingly. Why would you do that to a team, or why would you do that to a guy and not let him have a shot starting for another team, for one? And two, I mean, I know you're just one snap away from getting an injury, blah, 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 all that good stuff. $2.5 million for a backup is insane. If you can save that $2.5 million this year, you know you're going to cut him at the end of the year at the very least, pretty much no matter what. I don't see any situation where they don't cut him after this year. So why keep Stephen Nicholas if you don't have to? Especially with a guy like Paul Warlow, who I thought did way better than Joe. Joe probably didn't see him the same way that I guess I did, because I saw him everywhere, flying around, making plays from basically the beginning of the second quarter on. The minute they put him in the game, he was making plays. I wouldn't say let him wear number 58 just yet, but I mean, he was definitely making some plays. And then I thought Pat Schiller, I agree with him on Pat Schiller. He's a second-team guy. You don't want him going into the game, playing all day. But I mean, if Stephen Nicholas gets cut, you could throw Pat Schiller in there for 10 plays and let him play as the strong side linebacker for 10 plays every game. Let him get some experience. Let him build up. You know, have Croy Bierman be the base guy, but if you want Croy to play left end some plays, throw Schiller in there. What's the worst that could happen? He looks like a second-year guy, you know? What's the best that can happen? He looks like an NFL-level linebacker, you know?
Yeah, it is an interesting question because, you know, I won't deny I'm a big fan of Stephen Nicholas. He's not the world's greatest player, but, you know, he plays hard. He plays relatively smart. You know, he's not the world's greatest athlete. He's not a guy you want matching up against good receivers and good tight ends because they will work him over. But, you know, he's a guy, relatively speaking, you can trust him. And, you know, given Sean Weatherspoon's injury history that, you know, only one of his 3 years he's made it through the season healthy, you know, it would be nice to have that insurance policy. But you're right, if Croy Bierman is the starting Sam linebacker, and I do wonder a little bit, because we did see Bierman against Cincinnati playing that position, but you wonder, is that because Weatherspoon wasn't playing, or was that, you know, something that they intend to fully do this year? And Dent makes the move to be the nickel linebacker beside Weatherspoon, which, I believe Dent has to be that guy. If he doesn't earn that spot, given what Nicholas did last year in that role, then it may be unfair to write off Dent, but it's kind of like, how could you not take that spot from him? And so, yeah, with that, you know, exactly what you're saying, you can kind of hide the depth issues that the Falcons have at linebacker because you have those three other guys, and you can play more nickel and whatnot. So it does seem like, and as you said, you know, there's zero chance that Nicholas is a Falcon in 2014. All the signs seem to point, you know, if you're gonna get rid of a guy and you save $2.5 million against the cap, you know, why not? So it hurts my heart to say so, but it seems, you know, if Warlow and other guys, Bartu and Banks and Schiller and Nick Clancy and all those guys keep playing at a high level, it's not going to be a good September for Stephen Nicholas.
I agree with you. I think that, I guess another thing I was looking at is Stephen Nicholas, because he saves the $2.5 million. Say you cut Pere Jerry, that's another $900,000. So that's $3.4 million, in addition to the already $6.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So you're at around 10. You could give Seymour 1 year, $6 million, guarantee all of it, and just call it and be like, hey, we want you for this super important season that we're about to go through. You know, you're a better option than McConnor Regis or Travian Robertson, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And you're obviously better than Parade Jerry because we cut him for you, kind of thing. Or they cut him right after they signed him. But Parade Jerry's horrible. He does not deserve to be in the NFL. So why not bring in... You've got the talent linebacker. Between Warlow, between Robert James could play those 10 snaps. Pat Schiller could play those 10 snaps. Warlow could play those 10 snaps. Hell, Joplo Bartu could play those snaps. No offense to Nick Clancy or Brian Banks, but I don't see either one of them making either the roster or the practice squad this year. Sorry. I like them as people, but as players, I don't know if they make that leap. Now, if Nicholas does get cut, that gives you a chance to keep either Brian Banks or Bartu or Clancy on the practice squad. But I think Bartu's going to make someone's 53-man roster. I think that you will see an interesting setup at defensive end where maybe Malachi Goodman wins that left end job in the base package, and your base package can pop from a 3-4 to a 4-3 from OC standing up and sliding the line down a little bit. You'd have more of a Rex Ryan looking defense than what you would expect from Mike Nolan.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I think Parade Jerry is definitely done. I just can't see how the Falcons would keep him going into the season. He's the fourth best defensive tackle at best on the roster, and he's making $2 million. He's making, if you look at the Falcons cap sheet, it's like you look at Parade Jerry, it's like his cap hit this year is like $2 million. And you look at the next 8 guys, and I think the next 8 guys on the Falcons cap sheet are either all starters or they're backups like Jason Snelling or Joe Holly, which clearly have value. And look at Jerry, he just doesn't produce. He disappears for 8 weeks at a time, and then he'll make a tackle for loss, and you're like, oh, there's a Parade Jerry sighting, and then you'll go back into his shell for another 6 weeks, and it's you can pay somebody to give you exactly what Parade Jerry has given the Falcons over the last 3 years, $500,000, $600,000, you can get the same, if not more, production out of him. So, while a guy like Nicholas, I think, still has some value, I just don't see any with Parade Jerry. And I just, for the life of me, I couldn't understand if the Falcons opted to keep him, because he's in the same exact situation where he has no shot at being a Falcon in 2014. He's overpaid. Nicholas has at least produced at a starter's level over the last couple of years. Jerry hasn't come anywhere close to that. If it's Seymour's the guy that they pick up, great. If it's some other defensive tackle, it really doesn't matter to me. They can sign some dude off the street. They can go to some barbecue shack in Kansas City and see some fat guy and say, hey, you want to play defensive tackle? He'll probably be better than Parade Jerry. As long as they address that position, I'll be happy.
I mean, I can agree with you there because, that guy in the barbecue shack in Kansas City is probably going to be Dontari Poe. But
yeah.
Unfortunately, that guy is probably already under contract with the Kansas City Chiefs because they said, you know what, he's a barbecue shack guy from Kansas City.
Yeah.
Now, bring in Corey Williams, bring in Sean Cody. It wouldn't cost more than $1 million.
Yeah, you can take one of these, the Panthers are probably going to cut somebody, you can take their fifth defensive tackle, and he'll give you the exact same thing as Parade Jerry for, 25 cents on the dollar. So why not make that move? But we'll see what happens.
Actually, I could go for some Frank Curse. He would be fun to watch in this scheme.
Exactly. I was watching the like in the Steeler-Giant game, and I'm looking at the Steelers' third-string defensive line, and Al Woods and Alameda Tuamu, and I'm like, these guys are way better than Rick Jerry. So we'll see what happens.
Frank Curse had a sack against the Falcons last year.
He did?
Yeah.
But, Scott, what other things did you see in the first preseason game that you wanted to highlight or lowlight if you feel the need to?
I have to say that my favorite thing that I saw in the game all year, or in the game, all during the game, I saw a run game that is going to be better than people think it's going to be, provided they bench Garrett Reynolds.
Okay.
He gets no leverage when he blocks. He doesn't get any push on anybody. I mean, Joe Hawley, right? I realize that, our good friend Ryan isn't a big fan of Joe Hawley. But he's got more seat in his pants than Garrett Reynolds does. And he weighs 15 pounds less. Maybe it's because he's like 6'3" and he's like a little bowling ball built kind of guy, but come on, put Joe Hawley in at right guard, let him play. He was dominating the twos out there. Dominating. He had one, not bad, but like even play, and the rest were all positive. He was either knocking a guy over, or he was just standing there, pushing him away in pass protection. Like it was nothing. He was like, oh, Devin Still. All right, dude, you can't get around me. You're not pushing me backwards. I'm in my spot. The rest of the offensive line was moving around him. He was just pushing in his spot. Just beautifully pushing. He was calling out line calls. He was looking like Todd McClure out there. Good Todd McClure, not like end of last year Todd McClure where he was like getting injured and starting to fall off, but like really good Todd McClure when he should have gone to the Pro Bowl back in 2010.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I
always think of the good Todd McClure, not the bad Todd McClure. The guy that was underrated by people, for like 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah, good Todd McClure. The Todd McClure that had Harvey Dahl next to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think Joe Hawley would be Harvey Dahl, but I do think he deserves a starting spot on the line. And because Mike Johnson got injured, Lamar Holmes looked good. He had 2 bad plays, but again, James Harrison and Geno Atkins, guys who could have gone, let's put it this way, these 2 guys belonged in the last 2 Pro Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
And those are who you're losing your last 2 plays to. Oh, okay. Those are who your 2 negative grades are to. You make the 2s look like nothing. You make the 3s look even worse for the 5 plays you're in against them. I mean, Lamar Holmes did his job. He did his job. That's all he had to do was his job. And I was shocked at how good Jock McClendon was.
Okay.
He's the 3rd string center. He also plays guard. Have Hawley and McClendon compete for right guard. Quit throwing Garrett Reynolds out there because he's horrible. Horrible. No leverage.
I would like to see McClendon get work at guard this week. Maybe they had Matt Smith as the 3rd string left guard, and maybe flip those guys and see where McClendon works in that guard, or maybe move McClendon up to 2nd string right guard, move Harlan Gunn down to 3rd string. I don't know, but I would like to see McClendon get some work at guard before.
Harlan Gunn looked awful too. They need to stop putting these horrible undrafted free agent types or Garrett Reynolds in at right guard. Let Garrett Reynolds be the backup right tackle. Have Schrader learn left tackle and right guard and right tackle. Don't even keep Garrett Reynolds active for the game because he probably shouldn't play guard. Have McClendon be the inside backup. Have Schrader be the outside backup. Have Reynolds. Shoot, you could cut Reynolds. Sign somebody's draft pick that they magically cut because you know it's going to happen. Just like it does every year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Steelers cut Mike Golick Jr.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, with Lamar Holmes, I agree with you on Holmes. I thought he played well. I think he did have his struggles against some of the Bengals starting defensive linemen, which is not to be unexpected, considering the Bengals have probably one of the top 5, maybe top 3 defensive lines in the league.
It's a pretty beastly defensive line.
Yeah, I'll be concerned about Lamar Holmes when he faces guys like Cameron Wake and, Charles Johnson, but I'll be concerned about anybody that faces those guys. So, as long as he gets the job done, he doesn't have to be Kareem McKenzie, he doesn't have to be Michael or
He's just got to be like Tyson Clabo.
Yeah.
Like early Tyson Clabo. 2008 Tyson Clabo. Where he surprised us when he had those great games against guys like Cameron Wake and, well, I mean, not Cameron Wake, but like Jason Taylor in 2009 when he stonewalled them. That's what I want to see out of him. I don't need to see a Pro Bowl guy. I just need to see a guy who can hold his own. And I think we'll see that this year. Yeah,
I agree. As long as he's not a turnstile, as long as he's not Jamarcus Webb or something like that, he's just guys, that doorman at the back of the concert is just waving people into the backfield. As long as he's not that guy, I think we'll be all right.
I think he'll be the Ryan Harris or the Ephraim Salam, if you will, to the Sam Baker's Bob Whitfield.
Okay. I like that comparison.
He doesn't have to be the best. He's just got to be above average NFL starter, which is all he's going to be. And that's all Sam Baker is an above average NFL starter. And that's all he needs to be. Just don't let Matt get killed. Holy crap. What a concept.
Yeah, I mean, with the Falcons offensive line, it's not like they made the moves that they made with the intent that it's going to pay off this year. They made the moves they made to get, put Collins in the line, have Holmes and Johnson compete and all that stuff, really to kind of grow into an offensive line that, come 2014, come 2015, can kind of become, okay, now we have a really strong offensive line. But it's there's going to be some growing pains, as there always are. And, but as long as Matt Ryan is being Matt Ryan and Julio Jones is being Julio Jones, and et cetera, it's going to be okay, because that's exactly what it was last year. The Falcons' offensive line wasn't great last year. In fact, I would describe it as bad for probably 3/4 of the season, but it didn't really matter because you had, Matt Ryan playing at elite level, you had Julio Jones, Tony Gonzalez, et cetera, all playing at elite levels, and, now you have Steven Jackson back there, who is way better than Michael Turner, and I think he showed that on Thursday night. I think the criticism of Steven Jackson is ridiculous. I think you look at his production, he had like a 60% success rate on 5 carries. The 2 plays where he wasn't successful were the 2 plays that we've discussed that were, basically Geno Atkins and James Harrison being Geno Atkins and James Harrison. And,
exactly.
He wasn't running as hard, he wasn't trying, Steven Jackson on a normal Sunday is going to try to run through everybody. He's going to run through a brick wall, but it's the first preseason game. Steven Jackson knows that he was hired, the money we paid him is for the month of December and January, not for August, to a certain extent, not really for September. It's about finishing, not how you start. He's not going to go out and take the blows that he's, in a preseason game, in the first preseason game. No, forget that. If he's going to run out of bounds, let him run out of bounds, Who cares? We're paying him, for the playoff performance, not, I want to see Steven Jackson break 8 tackles in the first preseason game. It's dumb.
I mean, out of his 5 carries, though, Michael Turner would have been stopped behind the line for a loss of a yard at most on all of them.
Yeah.
Steven Jackson at least got to the line on all 5 of them, except for, I think, 1, which was that ridiculous James Harrison play. And even then, he only lost 1 yard. That was a play that James Harrison would have had Turner back when he was getting the ball from Ryan. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've either got a guy who's going to get you 5 yards pretty much every carry, or you've got Michael Turner, who sucks. And they're paying him much less than they were planning on paying Turner this year. So.
Yeah, a lot less. Yeah.
That's all I got. People have unrealistic expectations in the preseason, just like they have unrealistic expectations of draft picks.
Oh,
They
exactly.
expect the 7th round. They're expecting 7th round picks to be Pro Bowlers right off the bat, and they're expecting 1st round picks to be future Hall of Famers right off the bat. It's not going to happen that way. Desmond Trufant isn't going to come in and be, Darrelle Revis. He's not going to come in and be Champ Bailey. Down the line, maybe 3 or 4 years, I could see Desmond Trufant with Champ Bailey level. He's got Champ Bailey level potential. I'm not saying he's going to hit it, but I'm saying if he fulfills his potential, Desmond Trufant could be Champ Bailey. And I think Robert Alford could be Grimes plus speed. Or Asante Samuel if he didn't get burned as much. There's not really a great comparison for Alford. He's just going to be Robert Alford.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, the fact of the matter is rookie corners have their ups and downs, and the truth of the matter is the vast majority of rookie corners have a lot more downs than ups. It's a it's a big jump to go from, matching up against, cornerbacks from Arizona State and Colorado for, Desmond Trufant. And, he saw some good wide receivers last year, Robert Woods and all those guys, Keenan Allen, etc. But, Robert Woods and Keenan Allen aren't Julio Jones. They aren't Marcus Colston. They aren't, Brandon Marshall. These guys that have been doing this for 6, 7, 8, 10 plus years. Maybe Keenan Allen and Robert Woods will become those guys 3 or 4 years from now, but they're not. They certainly weren't those guys when they were in college, and so that's a big jump for cornerbacks. It's a big jump for all rookie players, and people tend to be like, "Oh, he did not have the good rookie season that I thought he did. He's a bust." Oh, this guy has not contributed at a Pro Bowl level by the end of his 2nd year. He's a bust. It's, people have unreal expectations. Guys grow into guys. The reality is most players don't become the players that you think of them as until their 3rd or 4th year in the NFL.
And some of them not even until their 5th or 6th year, when they're with their 2nd team.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. That's all I've got for this week. Do you have anything else, Aaron?
No, I just will say that, we play the Ravens this week. Looking forward to that game. Looking forward to seeing Peter Kahns try his best to block Haloti Ngata. I don't expect him to, dominate Haloti Ngata because Haloti Ngata is Haloti Ngata. But I'm looking forward to evaluating how Kahns handles that. So I'm looking forward to that.
It will be fun to watch. But for Aaron Freeman, I'm Scott Carasik. We had Joe Bussell at NFLosophy on earlier. You can find me at Scott Carasik. You can find Aaron at FalcFans. And then you can also find the show at Falcons PFC, all on Twitter.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.